They're basically branded up as smart drugs, essentially.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Strategy Show. We are super excited. We have Dan Murray here, and Dan is an entrepreneur and a podcast host, #1 in the UK. And last week we talked how to do customer research right, and he did grow and scale his nutrition supplements company in a very, very, very dense, competitive field. So, of course, for you, we are going to ask Dan, how did you do the competitive analysis, the positioning? How did you find your way into a field which is absolutely intensively competitive? And how did you create your niche?
So that's a good question. I guess as a starting point, the research that's interesting in our space, so our product is in the brain health category, right? But that doesn't really exist. In fact, the category that currently exists, I went to California to do the research for a month because California is the #1 wellness market in the world. London is actually super close behind it. It's #2. And it's like basically a #2 fight between London, New York, and Sweden, actually. So London is very ahead of the trends, but California is way ahead. And so there is actually the fastest growing segment of the vitamin industry is a category called nootropics, nootropics. They're basically branded up as smart drugs, essentially.
You want to make your sales more repeatable and reliable? Do you want to have less volatility and more growth in your revenue per month? At Strategy Sprints, we do only one thing: strategy in sprints. Strategy means having more revenue through a better offer. In sprints means having more energy in your team every week. Check out if your ROI is as high as it is for most service-based and online businesses and startups we work with, which is over 100%. You can see it in just 15 minutes by going to strategysprints.com/sales and completing our online exercise to know what your ROI would be with our accelerator program. We are ready to sprint. Are you?
Now, why that's particularly interesting is because I think that concept works quite well in California, where you've got the 1% of the 1%. And to give you an idea, the category is growing 20% a year compound annual growth and looking to be worth about $24 billion by 2024. So it's like a fast growing category for sure. However, when we came back to the UK and we were sort of outside of the bubble of California, we were asking people, have they heard of nootropics? Have they heard of this or heard of that? And, actually most people were saying, no, they hadn't. So we're like, okay, so the awareness is low. Beyond that, when you're trying to explain to someone that it's like essentially smart drugs that like help you, think faster, other than obviously everyone's saying Limitless with Bradley Cooper, there's definitely a trepidation, sort of a fear of, whether or not that's a very good idea to do for yourself. We zoomed out and looked at the data on Mintel, right? So strategically thinking about, well, what does the supplement industry look like? This nootropic space is super fascinating. You've got companies like Bulletproof and Onnit and like these very interesting players who are doing a great job, but the whole movement is based on biohacking. And the reason it's based on biohacking, which is essentially one person saying, I do this, this is my practice, and you can do it too, is it's essentially the opposite of science. Science is essentially answering a question and something that you can replicate over and over and over again with the same result. The natural nutrients, as in things that come from nature in supplements, and obviously our food, but less so whilst we're all in quarantine, to be fair, so definitely from supplements. The natural nutrients, they do have reams and reams of science available about what they do. So that gave us this kind of insight that if you look at the Mintel data and you look at the buying habits of what people do, you find that the most common supplements, the top 5, are things like omega-3, multivitamin, vitamin D, vitamin C, and vitamin B complex, right? If you try and map out, it's very easy to get caught up on the journey of like, oh, nootropics, like smart drugs, like that's growing super fast, big numbers. If you then plot that against the big guys, the omega-3s, the vitamin Ds and stuff, you can't even see it on the map, right? It's a speck in terms of the popularity, the comfort levels, the place that people really think already that they're comfortable around buying supplements. And you look at the data, and like apparently between, I mean, whether or not it's true, between 40 to 50% of people in the UK, and that number's the same in the US, purchase like a multivitamin every month, allegedly. So you're talking huge numbers, right? So this sort of helped us frame the insight about category. For us, it became really important to not be a nootropic, because our products are all based on the brain, and we see our category as brain health and cognitive performance. We feel like brain health and cognitive performance is a far more comfortable concept to get around than a trendy word that other people are playing into at the moment that doesn't have the scientific efficacy. Now, there is a downside to this. The problem is you can't patent anything that comes from nature. So really, your category definition and the way that you play what you're doing has to be led by brand. So your IP, your moat, your defensibility is pretty risky at this point, because fundamentally you don't have the leisure of having this chemical compound and this little trademark thing next to you. You're using things that come from nature that have loads of scientific efficacy about them. Your job is to present them in a beautiful form. And by creating your own category, you've got to figure out like, who is your brand talking to? How is it positioned? Why is it saying what it's saying to customers? And that's where we really got onto this idea of heights, the idea of reaching your heights and actually setting up as a brand, as a human potential company. So we like to do things as a company that help people improve their work performance and cognitive performance in general. And to give you like an idea of this, lockdown was announced in the UK, like yesterday. We just launched a work from home guide, like an expert guide with a bunch of different scientists and experts. So literally how to work from home for peak cognitive performance, according to science. And we launched that all within 24 hours. And it's like this beautiful PDF with scientific insights and commentary about how to have a perfect routine day from 7 p.m. all the way to 10 p.m. with a sleep scientist with a PhD, to, a neuroscientist with obviously a couple of PhDs, all the different things. But that's a very good example of how you distinctly define your brand and your category as brain health and cognitive performance. It isn't just take a pill and get smart, because I think that's rubbish. I think no one can take a pill and get smart. I think if you want to get smart, you have to invest in a system of betterment, in the same way as you cannot take a protein powder and get massive. You take a protein powder to optimize the work you do in the gym. So the same thing is true with your brain. You can give your brain the nutrients it needs, which gives you the best opportunity to thrive during the day and sleep well at night. But what you choose to do with your hours is still your own choice. So, you still have free will. And so our job as a company is trying to help coach you along how your brain works by bringing together expert scientists. And so our launch strategy has been the product which fits through your letterbox. So we redesigned the whole packaging and everything, made it beautiful so it can stand on your bedside table and look really lovely. And it fits through your letterbox, gets delivered to you every single month on a monthly subscription. And from day one of your subscription, you are entered into like a content coaching series with some of the world's leading experts on brain health and cognitive performance. So we have people like Dr. Rangan Chatterjee, who is the UK's and I think Europe's #1 wellness and health professional with the #1 health podcast in Europe. We have, like I say, experts in sleep. We have the founder of WeTransfer, for example, who does all of our content on digital health and digital behavior. So we work with leading experts to land in your inbox and coach you along the journey to explain how your brain works. That's kind of how we position ourselves as a brand. We're product and coaching to help guide you to better habits and better practices.
Beautiful. Talking of #1 podcast, of course, everybody here wants to know, how was it possible that you, in just 4 years, you built #1 business podcast in UK, where #2 are people like Tim Ferriss. So I'm really glad you're here again, Dan, because I want to know everything about that. How did you start it? What can you tell people who consider starting a podcast, a business podcast on their own? And also there, how did you do the positioning, the strategy, and the tactics, and the showing up? Thank you.
I'm looking forward to telling you.
And people, stay tuned if you want to learn about how to build your podcast and become #1 in your field.
We all know that working in sprints is better, but how do we know what we should work on? You're in luck because we have a 15-minute exercise that will give you complete clarity on where to take your project next. Go to strategysprints.com/sales to complete our short exercise and meet one-on-one with an expert sprint coach to identify your #1 bottleneck. Hey everyone, I hope you enjoyed that episode of The Strategy Show. Make sure to like this video below and subscribe so that you can stay up to date with every episode of The Strategy Show. Get daily CEO tips from CEOs for CEOs.